It's August 27th, everybody. Welcome to the video. Somewhere off the coast of Oman right now, a torpedo-shaped robot the size of a large dog is swimming through 80 feet of murky Gulf water, hunting for a bomb that costs less than a used pickup truck. And if it finds one, it's going to blow itself up on purpose. That's the job. That's the whole job description, start to finish. Meanwhile, 12 time zones away, a man in a suit in Tehran just told the entire world that anybody who comes looking for that bomb is going to become, and I'm quoting here, a very good target. So that's where we're at right now. Iran spent the better part of 6 months turning one of the most important 21 miles of water on the planet into a floating minefield. And now America's answer to it isn't a battleship. It isn't a bunker buster. It's a fleet of robots that can't feel fear because they don't have a nervous system to feel it with. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Hope you're doing great wherever you're watching from. So today, we're doing a full breakdown of what's actually going on beneath the surface of the Strait of Hormuz, because on Tuesday, President Trump stood up and basically declared victory, saying the mines are gone, cleared, done, finished. And about 24 hours later, Iran's deputy foreign minister stood up and said, essentially, nice try. We're going to get into why both of those men might genuinely be telling the truth at the same time, which sounds impossible on paper, but stick with me, it'll make sense. We're going to break down exactly what Iran dropped into that water, what it cost them to do it, what it's costing America to clean it up, the actual robots doing the dirty work down there, and why a bomb that costs about as much as a used sedan is currently causing more economic chaos than half of Iran's actual navy combined. And yes, we've got a global roundup section and a 4D chess section waiting for you at the end. So let's get into it. Let's rewind for a second, because this didn't happen overnight, and understanding the timeline actually matters here. Weeks after the war kicked off back in late February, Iran's National Defense Council put out a formal warning that if the enemy, their word, targeted Iranian coasts or islands, they would respond by mining the Strait of Hormuz. And for a while, honestly, a lot of analysts thought it was posturing. Iran talks big. Threatening the global economy is basically their national pastime at this point, right up there with holding press conferences about how they're definitely winning. But then the evidence started rolling in, piece by piece, and it stopped looking like a bluff pretty quickly. May 30th, Oman's Maritime Security Center puts out a warning telling shipping operators to be careful because they'd spotted what they called an object suspected to be a floating mine near their side of the strait. 3 days after that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is sitting in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee telling them flat out that Iran had, quote, mined large segments of Hormuz, international waters. Not their coastline, not their harbor, international waters. That distinction matters enormously here because mining your own backyard is one thing. That's basically just a defensive posture. Mining a strip of ocean that the entire planet depends on to move its energy supply, that's an act with global consequences attached to it. Then on June 11th, Germany's Navy puts out a formal notice, citing intelligence shared by the US and British navies, saying mines had been reported at 4 separate locations around the strait, though they couldn't even confirm their exact positions. Sit with that for a second. This is Germany, this is the UK, this is the United States. 3 serious, technologically advanced naval powers, and none of them could give you a precise pin on the map. That's not incompetence. By the way, that's just the nature of the weapon itself. You don't need precision to win with mines. You need presence. You need the mere possibility that something's sitting down there in the dark, and suddenly every insurance underwriter on the planet develops a conscience real fast. The UK, France, and Germany all responded by sending warships and mine countermeasure assets into the region, bracing for what everybody assumed was coming next. And that's really the heart of the story here, because maritime analysts now estimate Iran is sitting on a stockpile of somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 mines, a huge chunk of them domestically manufactured. Scott Savitz, a senior engineer over at RAND who specializes in naval operations and technology, broke it down pretty simply for reporters. Iran's got what he calls the classic spiky balls that everyone envisions. The moored contact mines, tethered to an anchor, floating just below the surface, waiting patiently for a hull to bump into them. But they've also got what he calls influence mines, sitting flat on the seabed, using acoustic or magnetic sensors to detect a ship passing overhead before triggering. Those ones are the genuinely scary category because you can't just eyeball them from a boat deck. Earlier intelligence had actually pinned down one specific Iranian model called the Mahan 3, a 300-kilo mine equipped with acoustic sensors specifically designed to detect passing ship traffic. So we're not talking about rusty World War II leftovers dredged up from a warehouse. We're talking about a modernized, purpose-built underwater ambush system, engineered specifically for this exact scenario. And here's the number that should genuinely make your head spin a little. According to analysis published by the Foreign Policy Research Institute, sophisticated modern mines like these can cost tens of thousands of dollars to build. Tens of thousands, total. Meanwhile, the economic and strategic cost of dealing with the fallout runs into the billions, and that gap right there is basically the entire war in miniature. One mine, or honestly even just the suspicion of one mine, is enough to freeze an entire shipping lane cold. You don't need to actually hit anything. You just need somebody to think you might have put something down there, and the whole insurance industry starts sweating bullets. It's basically the maritime version of a fake bomb threat shutting down an airport terminal for 6 hours. Except in this case, the threat genuinely might go off, so nobody can afford to just shrug it off and move on. So what does America actually send to deal with a threat like this? And here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because the honest answer is the Navy's traditional toolkit for exactly this job had basically been gutted right before the war even started. The last 4 Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships stationed out of Bahrain decommissioned in September. The MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters, the old heavy lift choppers that used to physically tow magnetic sleds through the water to sweep for mines the old-fashioned way, phased out entirely in August. So you've got the United States Navy walking into arguably its most dangerous mine warfare environment in decades. And its dedicated legacy toolkit for that exact job was already sitting in a museum somewhere collecting dust. Years of what the FPRI politely calls institutional neglect catching up at precisely the worst possible moment. Just classic timing, honestly, like discovering your fire extinguisher expired the same week your kitchen catches fire. So what's left to actually do the job? Robots. A lot of very expensive, very patient robots. CENTCOM, under Admiral Brad Cooper, started by sending in guided missile destroyers first, specifically the USS Frank E. Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy, transiting the Strait and operating in the Gulf as part of what officials called setting the conditions for the broader mine clearance mission. And Admiral Cooper put it pretty plainly in a statement at the time saying, "Today, we begin the process of establishing a new passage, and we will share this safe pathway with the maritime industry soon to encourage the free flow of commerce." Nice, diplomatic, very official sounding. But behind those destroyers, the actual workhorses of this entire operation are a bunch of unmanned systems that most people watching this have probably never even heard of before today. The star of the show is the Mark 18 Mod 2 Kingfish, built by General Dynamics. This thing is a battery-powered robotic submarine, torpedo-shaped, launched off the back of a small boat, and it uses high-resolution side-scan sonar to essentially paint a live picture of the seafloor as it swims a fixed search pattern back and forth. It's not looking for anything specific with its eyes, because it doesn't have eyes. It's listening to sound bouncing off the ocean floor and building a detailed map in real time, then flagging anything that doesn't quite belong down there. A rock looks like a rock to the sonar. A 300-kilo Iranian mine with acoustic sensors does not look like a rock, and that contrast is the entire trick behind the whole system. Alongside the Kingfish, the Navy's also running a sister platform called Knifefish, doing basically the same job in parallel, sweeping in that same fixed pattern, mapping anomalies across a wider stretch of seabed simultaneously. And once one of these drones flags something suspicious down there, that's when the SeaFox gets its turn. The SeaFox is where this whole operation gets almost cinematic. It's an expendable, fiber-optic, guided robotic torpedo, roughly $100,000 a unit, and its entire purpose in life, its one and only job, is to swim directly at the suspected mine and detonate a shaped charge right on top of it. It destroys the mine and destroys itself in the exact same instant. One shot, one job, no retirement plan, no pension, nothing. It's basically the kamikaze intern of naval warfare. It shows up, does the single task it was built for, and then it's simply gone. And honestly, nobody in the Navy is losing sleep over that particular trade-off, because the alternative used to be an actual human diver swimming down there with real hands and real lungs to do the exact same job by touch in the dark, next to a live explosive designed specifically to kill people. So when you hear the phrase, "the Navy sent underwater drones," what you should really be picturing is a $100,000 disposable robot torpedo eating a landmine, so a 19-year-old sailor never has to. And it's not just working underwater either. From the deck of those destroyers, they're also flying the MH-60S Seahawk helicopter, fitted with something called the Airborne Laser Mine Detection System, which uses pulsed lasers to spot mines floating closer to the surface, the ones that don't even need a sonar drone to find because they're basically sitting right under the waterline where a laser can catch them. Once one's detected from the air, the helicopter can then deploy the ANASQ-235 Airborne Mine Neutralization System, which lowers a torpedo-sized tube carrying its own set of expendable destructor vehicles down into the water to finish the job from above. And layered on top of all of that, you've got the ANWSQ-46, Barracuda mine neutralization system handling near-surface threats specifically, plus a common uncrewed surface vessel, this one built by RTX, that tows a brand new AQS-20 sonar rig behind it on the surface, scanning strips of ocean roughly 30 meters wide with every single pass it makes. So picture the whole operation stacked in layers, almost like a defensive formation. Surface drones scanning wide lanes on top of the water, underwater drones mapping the seafloor in fine detail below, helicopters lasering the near-surface threats from above, and when something finally gets flagged, a $100,000 torpedo swims in to make it somebody else's permanent problem. It's genuinely one of the most methodical, patient, unglamorous military operations you'll ever hear described, and it's quietly saving lives every single day it runs without ever making a headline for it. Now here's where it gets almost funny, in a dark sort of way. Reports actually surfaced recently that Iran itself lost track of exactly where a lot of its own mines ended up. U.S. officials said over the weekend that Tehran reportedly has no clear idea where all of them were placed anymore. So somewhere inside the IRGC Navy right now, there's probably some poor guy staring at a hand-drawn map covered in question marks going, well, we know it's somewhere between here and roughly over there, probably. Give or take a mile. It's like ordering a pizza, losing the receipt, and then also somehow losing the pizza itself. You know for a fact, you did the thing. You just can't prove where it actually is anymore. And that brings us to Tuesday, when President Trump posted on Truth Social that the Navy had removed or detonated all sea mines in the Strait, full stop, and he added a pretty stern warning right on top of it, saying, Iran has been notified that any ship or boat placing new mines will be immediately and systematically destroyed. Ours. Bold statement. Confident statement. And then, right on cue, less than 24 hours later, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Kazem Garibabadi, comes out and says the strait remains closed, dismissing Trump's comments as, quote, only aimed at calming the markets, and then adding that any U.S. mine detection vessels entering the area would become, and I genuinely love this specific phrase, very good targets. Very good targets. Not just targets, mind you. Very good ones, specifically. I don't know if there's some kind of internal rating system over there for how good of a target you qualify as, but apparently Iran's running a tier list, and a Navy mine hunting drone just landed itself on the podium. And here's the thing, both of these guys might genuinely be right at the exact same time, and that's really the whole nuance of today's story. Mark Hilborn, a senior lecturer in war studies at King's College London, told reporters there's actually good reason to trust the U.S. claim on this one specifically. His words were that the assessment came from CENTCOM initially, and in this, we can have strong confidence. The Navy detonated a substantial number of confirmed mines. They leveraged space-based surveillance alongside those underwater drones, scanning the seabed inch by inch, and they took out several Iranian mine-laying vessels along the way, so the known, charted, actively monitored shipping lanes. Those really are functionally clear right now. But clearing the lanes doesn't mean mine-free everywhere across the entire strait. Hilborn pointed out that a small number of drifting or uncharted mines could absolutely still be floating around somewhere outside the monitored lanes, mines that broke free from their moorings at some point and just went wandering off with the current like a lost dog that slipped its leash. And Iran, mine-tracking spreadsheet chaos or not, absolutely retains the physical ability to go lay more mines whenever they feel like it. That capability didn't disappear just because the current batch got swept. In fact, hours after Trump's declaration, the Joint Maritime Information Center put out its own separate statement warning of a, quote, continued risk of drifting or uncharted mines right around the strait's main traffic separation lanes. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Center echoed that warning almost immediately, posting that mine danger areas remain active in the region. So you've got the White House essentially declaring the pool officially safe to swim in, and the lifeguards standing right there next to the pool going, technically, sure, mostly, but also there might still be a shark somewhere out there. We just genuinely don't know exactly where it went. It's the classic gap between military technical truth and public-facing political marketing, and both of those things can absolutely be accurate at the same moment. That's the nuance nobody really wants to sit with, because it doesn't fit cleanly into a headline or a 2-minute cable news segment. Now, here's a number that tells you the real underlying story better than any political statement could ever manage. Before this war kicked off, roughly 130 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz every single day, carrying about a fifth of the entire planet's oil and natural gas supply through that one narrow channel. That's not a niche regional shipping lane we're talking about. That's one of the main arteries of the entire global economy, full stop. And even with the mines supposedly cleared from the main channel now, War risk insurance costs for ships crossing that stretch of water have climbed from between 1% and 3% of a ship's hull value before the war, up to somewhere between 7.5% and 10% now. Do the actual math on that for a second. A single supertanker and its cargo can be worth roughly $300 million. At 10%, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars just to insure one solitary voyage through one stretch of ocean. That's not a rounding error buried in a spreadsheet somewhere. That's a real business decision that makes captains and shipping companies quietly reroute entirely, or just sit anchored and wait it out instead of risking the crossing. And Hilborn made a point I think is genuinely important here, saying insurance premiums simply aren't going to drop off a cliff just because of one presidential announcement on social media. His exact quote was, "A single announcement, while welcome, will not bring an immediate drop in the rates, and that premiums actually need what he called a protracted period of calm before underwriters genuinely start to relax their pricing models." Underwriters don't care about press conferences or truth social posts. Underwriters care about actuarial tables and how many consecutive weeks have passed since the last actual explosion happened in the water. It's basically the insurance industry's version of saying, I'll believe it's over when I see 6 straight boring news cycles in a row, and not 1 second sooner. Meanwhile, the shipping world itself isn't just sitting around passively waiting for a permission slip from Washington or Tehran. There are actual functioning workarounds forming in real time on the water right now. Bloomberg reported that Abu Dhabi National Oil Company's trading arm has started offering to shuttle Iraqi oil cargoes through the strait using vessels that make short trips with their transponders switched completely off before transferring the cargo over to other ships once they're safely clear of the Gulf entirely. Think about that setup for a second. It's basically a stealth relay race for oil tankers, ghosting through the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth with their location broadcasters deliberately turned off, like a teenager sneaking out of the house with their phone's location sharing disabled. And this development comes right as the UAE announced an indefinite trade embargo against Iran just last week. Saudi Arabia is doing something similar on their end, leaning heavily into ship-to-ship transfers and rolling out their own government-backed insurance scheme specifically to self-insure around the crisis, rather than sit around waiting for the international insurance market to eventually calm down on its own timeline. Alex Almeida, an analyst over at the maritime intelligence firm Ambry, said the shuttle service being run by the UAE is genuinely proving its worth and taking a substantial chunk of the insurance risk off the shoulders of individual shipping operators. But then he said something that I think might actually be the single most important sentence in this entire story today. He said, "I think for the first time Iran is under more real pressure than the US." Sit with that phrase for a second and really let it land. 6 months into a war that started with Iran deliberately trying to choke off a fifth of the entire world's energy supply as leverage against everybody else, and now the analysts on the ground are saying the leverage has actually flipped completely, and it's Iran feeling the real squeeze now, not the tanker companies, not the shipping insurers, not Washington. When your entire national strategy was built around making the pain worse for the other guy than it is for yourself, and instead you're the one running out of road first, that's not a winning position by any measure. That's a regime that's slowly running out of cards to play, one workaround at a time. And Almeida flagged something else worth watching closely going forward. He said this new pressure could realistically push Iran toward finding, in his words, another means of changing the balance of power, including possibly striking those exact ship-to-ship transfer zones out in the Gulf of Oman, areas that happen to sit well within range of Iranian missiles and drones already stationed along the coast. So even with the mines largely mapped and swept from the main lanes, the actual maritime security firm assessment on the ground is that mines were honestly never the main event to begin with. Almeida put it about as plainly as you can, saying, "The issue is that mines have never been the primary threat. The bigger, more persistent, more dangerous threat facing shipping in that strait remains drones and anti-ship crews and ballistic missiles fired straight off the Iranian mainland whenever Tehran decides to pull that trigger. For now, those particular strikes have gone quiet. But quiet isn't remotely the same thing as over, and every single captain steering a supertanker through that strait right now knows that distinction better than anybody sitting comfortably behind a desk in Washington or Tehran ever will. If you're finding this kind of breakdown genuinely useful, go ahead and drop a like on it and hit subscribe while you're at it, because we track this exact situation pretty much daily, and there's a lot more coming on how this economic squeeze actually plays out for Iran over the next few weeks, as this whole standoff continues to develop. You made it to the global roundup section, my friend. Let's get into it. Starting in Ukraine, because things escalated pretty hard there over the past 24 hours. Russian forces carried out what's being described as a double-tap attack on rescue workers in Kramatorsk in Donetsk Oblast, striking the same location a second time, specifically with an FPV drone, while emergency crews were still actively working the aftermath of an earlier strike. Combined Russian attacks across the country killed at least 4 people and injured 95 more in that same span. A double tap, for anybody who doesn't know the term, means hitting the exact same location twice, timed deliberately, so the second strike catches the first responders who rushed in to help the initial victims. There's no version of that specific tactic that's actually about military objectives. That's just designed purely to make the job of saving lives as dangerous and hesitant as humanly possible going forward. On the flip side, Ukraine's been far from quiet, either over this same stretch. Ukrainian forces reportedly resumed strikes on Russian logistics infrastructure with what local officials called a massive drone attack targeting a wild berries distribution hub that's essentially Russia's version of Amazon, in Tambov Oblast, sparking a fire that spread across more than 100,000 square meters of warehouse space before crews could get it under control. So both sides are still trading serious hits daily, deep inside each other's territory, at a pace that shows absolutely no sign of slowing down as we head deeper into the fall. Second story, and this one's a little closer to home for a lot of you watching. Down in the Caribbean, Joint Task Force Southern Spear carried out another lethal strike on a vessel authorities say was actively transporting narcotics, killing 4 people that the military identified as members of a designated drug trafficking network. This falls under the broader America's Counter-Cartel Coalition, a multinational effort the U.S. has been building since March, aimed specifically at cutting off cartel trafficking routes, curbing illegal immigration flows, and pushing back on foreign influence across the entire Western Hemisphere. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth reaffirmed America's commitment to that exact coalition just a couple weeks ago during a visit to Panama, right around the closing ceremony of the Panamax military exercises down there. So while pretty much all the eyes and all the headlines are locked onto the Persian Gulf right now, there's a parallel, ongoing shadow war happening in international waters just off America's own coastline, and it's simply not getting anywhere near the same amount of coverage, despite running at a remarkably consistent pace week after week. Here we are at the 4D chess strategic analysis section, everybody. So let's zoom all the way out here, because when you strip away the press conferences and the Truth Social posts and the diplomatic statements, here's what's actually happening underneath all of it. Iran built an entire strategy around asymmetry from the very beginning. Cheap mines, tens of thousands of dollars apiece total, capable of freezing a global shipping artery worth billions of dollars per day. That's not brute force in any traditional military sense. That's pure leverage through manufactured uncertainty. You don't actually need to sink 100 ships to win this kind of fight. You just need the entire world to believe you might sink one, and suddenly premiums spike overnight, captains reroute their entire routes, and the pain spreads across the whole global economy without Iran ever having to fire another missile after the initial mining operation was complete. That's the entire play, in one sentence. Make the fear itself do all the heavy lifting for you. But here's the fundamental problem with a strategy built entirely on manufactured fear. Fear has a shelf life. And eventually, the other side simply adapts around it, piece by piece, until the fear stops working the way it used to. That's exactly what we're watching unfold in real time right now. The U.S. brought in Kingfish drones, SeaFox neutralizers, laser-equipped helicopters, and a rotating cast of destroyers to methodically strip away the physical threat, piece by piece, mine by mine, robot by robot, without risking a single American sailor's life doing it the old-fashioned way by hand. And at the exact same time, the global shipping industry itself independently adapted around the remaining uncertainty on its own, building stealth shuttle relays with transponders switched off, ship-to-ship transfers staged safely outside the danger zone, and government-backed insurance schemes designed specifically to replace a spooked and overpriced international market. Every single one of those workarounds chips away at the one thing Iran actually needed in order to win this entire standoff, which was making the pain unbearable enough, fast enough, that somebody blinked first and folded. And, according to the people actually tracking the situation on the ground day to day, it's genuinely not America that's blinking here. For the first time in this entire 6-month standoff, the real pressure appears to have flipped decisively onto Tehran instead. Their currency is a complete mess. Their oil exports remain strangled by sanctions and reduced buyers. Their own senior officials have publicly, on the record, admitted they can't reliably feed their own people or pay their own troops right now. And now their signature weapon, the one specifically designed to make the entire world pay a steep price for opposing them, is getting systematically dismantled piece by robots that don't get scared, don't need sleep, don't need pensions, and collectively cost less than the insurance premium on a single supertanker's voyage. So when Iran's deputy foreign minister goes on the record calling U.S. mine hunting vessels very good targets, that's not a position of genuine strength talking. That's a regime trying desperately to sound dangerous, right as its actual real-world leverage evaporates in real time in front of everybody watching. It's the same energy as somebody losing an argument badly and suddenly just starting to talk louder instead of actually making better points. The real question hanging over all of this now isn't really whether the mines are technically cleared, because functionally, at least in the charted main lanes, they probably genuinely are at this point. The real question is whether Iran, cornered and rapidly running out of economic road to maneuver on, decides to try something new to reclaim lost leverage before it's too late. Whether that's another mining wave in the uncharted waters, a direct strike on one of those ship-to-ship transfer zones everybody's now quietly depending on to keep oil moving, or something else entirely that nobody's even predicting yet. Because a regime that's losing slowly and knows full well that it's losing is often genuinely more dangerous in the short term than one that's still confident and comfortable. Desperation changes the calculus in ways confidence never does. What do you guys think happens next here? Does Iran quietly accept the new normal and let these shuttle routes and ship-to-ship transfers become the permanent long-term workaround around them? Or does Tehran try one more play to flip the pressure back onto Washington before this economic squeeze becomes fully permanent and irreversible? Let me know what you think. Down in the comments below, I genuinely read every single one of them. If this breakdown helped connect some of the dots for you today, do me a solid favor and hit that subscribe button, drop a like on your way out, and share it with somebody who's been trying to make real sense of what's actually going on out in the Gulf right now, because there's a lot of noise floating around out there and not nearly enough people actually walking through the hardware and the strategy sitting underneath all of it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really do appreciate every single one of you being here today. We'll see you in the next one.